Now, looking back at my 15 years as a welder in the manufacturing and construction industry, I realized something. Just how naive and ignorant I was back then. And not just me. All of my friends back in the day when we were in welding school just walking around all starched up thinking we were just going to be the smooth talking, slick bead welding dudes out there. And that's all we were going to ever do was just weld. Well, I put together a list of 32 things that I wish I was able to tell my younger self 15 years ago. I think every welder should know how to do these things at the drop of a hat. Fabrication, welding, rigging, maintenance, and everything in between. Hold on to your screens. We're going to start right off the rip with how to use a grinder properly. The grinder is your best friend, and no matter what kind of abrasive you're putting it on there, whether it's a flap disc, a cutoff wheel, a grinding disc, a fiber disc, it doesn't matter. You need to know how to use each one properly. At the end of the day, people just want to see a nice, silky, smooth product, and if it is a groove weld and you're grinding in there, just make sure it's all clean. Keep it clean, keep it happy, and respect your grinder. Now, number 2 is one of those things that I didn't think about when I was younger, and that's being able to read a gas cylinder. And I'm not just talking about the sticker on the side that says it's got whatever gas inside of it. I'm talking about the stamps, who makes it, the sizes, all that good stuff. Because I didn't know when I'm buying a random bottle off Facebook Marketplace that the inspection date is out, and I'm trying to go fill it up, and they're like, sorry, the inspection's out, we can't take it. Or maybe it's a certain size where certain bottle places won't exchange them for you, or that was a rental bottle and you shouldn't even have that in the first place. The expiration date, where it was manufactured, including everything that's inside of it, is all stamped on that bottle. Number 3, how to set a welding machine. Sounds pretty obvious. If you're going to be a welder, you should know how to set a welding machine. But I can't tell you how many times I saw as an instructor, students walking into their booth, turning on the machine and just getting started. It doesn't matter the process, whether it's stick, MIG, TIG, whatever it is, you should know how to set the machine up for the application at hand. In my class, I went around and changed all the machines. I turned knobs, turned things off, changed polarities, because I expected you to know how to set the machine when you walked in. And I've even seen it. People come into a weld test, see a machine they've never seen, and just not know what to do. So you should really get familiar with any type of machine. Number 4 is probably one of my favorites, and that's how to change a MIG liner. The liner is basically that little tube, I guess, that runs through the inside of your MIG gun, and this could be made of different materials depending on what type of wire you want to run through, and it can get damaged and kinked up or clogged, and it'll give you some just weird wire restriction, and you're doing everything trying to figure out what your machine's doing wrong, and all you needed to do was know how to change your MIG liner. There's a little nuance to it, little bits and pieces that you need a few tools for, but at the end of the day, it's not too challenging, and it can really save you a whole lot of stress on the back end of stuff. Number 5, how to service your own welding leads. And I'm more or less talking like the ends of them, the stingers and the end. Like they're eventually going to get burnt up. The stinger's going to get crushed or not work quite as well. So you're going to want to, at the drop of a hat, be able to replace them. You need like a flathead or a Phillips head. You're going to need a couple sets of metric or even standard Allen keys. You never know depending on this type of connector. Not to mention the cables get burned up. So you're going to need to know when and where to cut and replace those new stingers. Number 6, how to wire a 220 single phase plug. Really common thing you're going to have to do. Some of the machines come with plugs, some of them they don't come with plugs. You got to wire your own plug. There's only 3 cords, and the green one is the really only one that matters. Just make sure it goes to the ground on the plug. Green to ground, green to ground. Very simple. If you get the green to the other 2 points, you're making your machine live. Like you're going to touch it in the housing, it's going to be electrified. Make sure the ground is in the right spot, and as far as the black or white or whatever colors those other 2 wires are, they honestly don't matter. You can have them either way, and you're still going to work with this specific type of plug. Number 7 lives in the realm of fabrication, and that's simply how to read a level. Now, I know, again, another simple thing, but I've watched people not read them well enough. They'll see that bubble inside the lines, you know, the little bubble that you're supposed to be looking at. I've seen people be just a hair outside the line, be a hair inside the line, touching it, or just not quite center. That's not level. That's not plumb. You gotta get the bubble right in the middle every time. And an easy, quick follow-up is number 8, which is how to use a square. There are a few different types of squares, but really at the end of the day, make sure that you're holding it right. And we don't want to hold it at a little askew of an angle because you're not square there. It needs to sit flat and bump up what you're working with in order to get a proper square. You don't want a little tack on the bottom or the side. You don't want a little weld or anything in the way to keep it from sitting flat and up against it. If there's no room for the square and you're trying to come in at an angle, you're not square. Even if you eyeball it well enough, you're still not square. Use the square right and use the right tool for the job. Number 9, Service a torch. You should know your way around your cutting torch and your equipment, making sure before you use it that it's safe to use. Check for leaks on it, make sure the O-rings are still good. And lastly, just be able to clean a tip properly, or at least know that you should be cleaning your tip. Carbon can get built up and it just makes for an ugly cut. Number 10 is a funny one, because if you don't know these before you get out there and you're working around heavy equipment and picking up some pretty heavy stuff, to prevent yourself from looking like a chicken trying to tell people where to go, you need to know your hand signals. You need to know hoist up, you need to know hoist down, you need to know up a little, down a little, raise the boom, lower the boom, extend the boom, retract the boom. Then you got dog it, stop, and stop. Something else I wish I could have told my younger self was you didn't need a bunch of fancy equipment to be a mobile welder or to just make money as a welder in a shop. The Weld Pack series here changed my mind. Shout out to today's video sponsor, which is Lincoln Electric. These machines are pretty sharp. They come fresh out of the box with pretty much everything you need for welding outside of the gas or the wire. If there's no gas at all, like this little flux core welder here, this is the 90 IFC. I actually made more money than what I paid for it on the first job in a trailer repairs. So I know that thing's a powerhouse, even on a 100-foot 110 extension cord. Want to add a little bit of gas to it? Then you add this little weld pack here, which is your MIG welder. It does both MIG and flux core, so you still kind of get the best of both worlds. They're real simple. They're only 110, which will get you up to about 1/4 of an inch. The MIG guns are kind of just stuck on there, which is kind of nice, but also you got to bring the machine pretty close to you. But luckily, they're really lightweight. If you need a little bit more power and you don't mind TIG and stick, this thing has been my favorite machine so far. This is the 225i stick. This ain't your grandpa's cracker box right here. This little machine packs 225 amps. It is 220 or 110 as far as dual voltage goes. Every rod that I put in it, it'll weld and it'll scratch start TIG. It's got its own settings for it. It's super simple, super basic. You can put all your leads in there, close it up, and now you got one of the most portable powerhouses on the market right now. Shout out to Lincoln Electric for the Weld Pack series. I remember sitting back in high school as like a sophomore and just thinking to myself, when the heck am I going to use trigonometry? And then later on in life, when I'm trying to do pipe fitting things, I'm like, God dang it. Little did you realize paying attention when it came to adding and subtracting fractions or doing like the Pythagorean theorem, even all the way up into your trigonometry when it comes to like pipe fitting and knowing your takeoffs and runs and all that kind of good stuff. Man, there's a lot of math involved, but no one wants to tell you that. Never throw away an old TIG rig. I don't care if you overheated it, the hose busted, or it's torn somewhere. Keep it. Just keep it off to the side, because I did for a few years, and I was able to stock up on 3, and that leads me to number 12, building your own braided ground. This is a welder's hack for sure. It's not necessarily super kosher because it is exposed cable. The way it's built is taking those 3 TIG rigs and stripping them. I like the TIG rigs because when you go ahead and cut them, they leave a little crimped end. Go ahead and put your connector on there. You don't need the insulator yet because you still got to braid everything. We don't want anything to come unraveled, so that's the whole point of doing the whole long braid. It doesn't have to be all the way the full length. You can cut it to whatever, but we just want equal lengths, so we'll end up cutting those equal lengths, and then I'll take a lug, waller it out a little bit with a bit just so that cable can go through it. You can do different things like putting a ground clamp on the end of it and using that, but I wanted this one to be lightweight. Now you have a ground that is all copper, so it has tons of connection points. You get a really good ground no matter what. Honestly, when it comes to welding like stainless steel pipe or titanium and things where it's long links and stuff, man, a braided ground is something that you want to keep in your toolbox. Number 13, set your working pressure for your cutting torches and for your welding machines. Not the pressure that it's set when there's no flow, but let the machine or the torch flow gas while you're setting the pressure, working pressure. If you ever got a sneaky suspicion that your welding machine is putting down some dirty welds, you might have a leak in your line. So you got to know where to look. That's number 14, is check for leaks on your welding equipment. Typical suspects are right by the regulator somewhere, maybe even the back of the machine. And one that I always get to students is not plugging that MIG gun in enough. There's a couple holes on that little plug-in. If those don't line up with the hose going in, you're just going to get this little bit of porosity here and there, and you're not going to know why. It's leaky. I think we've all been there before, or at least if we haven't, it's probably going to happen where you drop something heavy like a piece of pipe on an extension cord or your grinder cord, and now you're just sitting there like, well, now what? You could go about taking those 2 pieces of cords and making 2 cords out of it by putting plugs on, or you can splice them together. It really is simple. Just take the main insulation and strip it back a good ways. All we got to do is just match the colors together. I opted to use these little fancy connectors that are supposed to have a little solder on the inside, but I didn't trust them too much. What I always trust is a good bit of electrical tape around each one in case there was some burn through, and then we went back with some more electrical tape, and lo and behold, you've got a cord that's ready to rock and roll. And I wouldn't say it's a fix for the cord, but it is working for now. Obviously, if we're going to know how to maintain a cutting torch, we better know how to use a cutting torch. Cutting torches are sweet, man. You can braze with them, you can weld with them, you can heat things up really hot with them, and you can cut like super thick metal with them. But it does take, like anything else, a bit of practice. Nothing makes you feel cooler than number 17. Walking through the shop just kicking a bottle just effortlessly. You've got this 300 pounds of steel and pressurized missile in your hand, and you're just casually kicking it across the shop. Fun fact, you're not really supposed to do that more than 10 feet, but here's how you do it. Lean it like 20 degrees and then have your hand just cupping it, and then you're just gonna kick the side of it from the back of the tank off to the side, right? And that's gonna roll it. It takes some time to get used to, but man, you feel pretty cool when you can kick a bottle. Knowing your electrode classifications is something that you learned like day one in welding school, and you might have just completely forgot about it. That's number 18, is knowing all those numbers and letters that are on every single packaging of a stick rod or wire, whatever it is. You need to know what a 7018 is. You need to know what a 6010 is. You need to know what a 6013 is, a 7014, a 7024. You need to know what a low hydrogen downhill rod would look like, or maybe it's just some flux core wire. You can't tell a difference if it's aluminum or stainless, but if you read the label, you would know. Knowing what filler metal you have is a little bit easier to know than the base metal, because again, they have a label on it. Sometimes it's not that simple with your base metals. You can do a few things to test it though. First off, visually, what color is it? Not only that, but the weight. If you can pick it up, that'll definitely tell you if it's aluminum or stainless right off the jump. Now, it could be magnesium, it could be aluminum. There's other ways to check. You could put a little bit of white vinegar on aluminum and magnesium will react. Or you can just do a simple magnet test. Anything that's ferrous metal is going to be magnetic. Even some stainless steels are magnetic, but when it comes to what type of steel, you really got to know by the carbon content. So you try either the scratch test with a file. If it digs and grooves or chews into the metal, you've got a lower carbon steel. And if you're still wondering what kind of metal it is, you can always do the grinder test. Taking a grinder to it and seeing the sparks will tell you a whole lot about a metal, because some of them have a whole bunch of sparks, some have no sparks at all. The next one is pretty frustratingly obvious: how to read a tape measure properly. I still make mistakes, and I still catch myself looking at it and like counting all the lines out. Everything's in a 16th for the most part on our end of the globe. Nothing makes you more embarrassed when someone's like, hey, how long is that? And you're like, oh, it's the 13 and the third biggest line from that one. No one likes that. Number 21. Know your way around an art gouger. Super handy tool to know how to use. You can rip through some metal, or you can ruin some metal. Only if you know how to use it right. How to use a file is number 20. File is a great tool to have. The old bastard here can remove BBs, dress up a weld really nice. It's great for the inside of stuff, deburring any type of metal, getting that sharp edge off. You make a little boo-boo on the side of the pipe like an arc mark, this is the way you're going to want to take it off. It's real sneaky, real casual like, but don't run it back and forth. It cuts one way. If you pull it, you're going to end up dulling it. Know how to use your file. On top of knowing how to set up your welding machine, you should know how to troubleshoot it. And that's number 23. It's how to work on it. If you see something wrong with your weld, or something sounds funny, looks funny, you need to know where to start backtracking things. Is it the polarity? Is it a gas issue? Is it a power issue? Is it a grounding issue? There could be a number of things it could be, and you can't just tap your foreman on the shoulder and just be like, something's broken. Number 24 is how to sharpen tungsten. Maybe that might not include every welder out there, just those TIG welders, but just know when there's a little bit of schmutz on there, when it's chipped, when it's dull. Make sure you have a clean, sharp tungsten when you TIG weld. It's really easy. Yeah, you could ball it, you could blunt it. Comment. Back when I was an instructor in welding school, one of my favorite things to do was when a student had their grinding disc locked up on a grinder, was karate chop it off, which is my number 25. I think every welder should know how to do it, whether it's a wire wheel, whether it's a grinding disc, a flat disc. None of them are safe. Just make sure you wear a glove. One of the first things I asked a student when they were showing me their fresh weld was, what do you think about it? Which is number 26. Know how to inspect your own work. You should be able to see a discontinuity like undercut, a porosity. You should be able to maybe know if you got some slag inclusions or there's underfill or overfill or overlap. You should know what all of these look like and how to correct them. Maybe you were too cold, too slow, too hot, your angle was off. Like, you need to be able to read your weld so that you know how to adjust. I can read a weld better than I can read a book. 26 easily rolls into 27, which is how to fix it, how to repair it. A lot of the times, if it's your own work, you're going to need to fix it, especially before the QC comes by. Never just make a mistake and then be like, hey, come look at my mistake. No, figure out how to fix it first. Ask for some help for someone next to you, or if you're in school, ask your instructor for sure. How to fix a mistake is way more valuable than how to do it right in the first place. I know that sounds a little backwards, but it's going to happen. Not only that, when you get really good at never making mistakes, now you get to go fix other people's mistakes. If I ever see welding schools that are just handing out beveled material, you see me up in arms. Because number 28 is how to prep and bevel their own plate and pipe themselves by hand. I always had the theory of like, you got to learn how to do it the hard way, and that way you can appreciate it when you can be able to do it the easy way. And I get it, you're supposed to be welding, not grinding, but you're not going to get away from that ever in your career if you thought you were. As an instructor for like 5 years, I've seen welders literally fail their weld tests because they didn't prep their bench straps properly. That's number 29. I want those things as an inspector to be silky smooth, nice straight edges, clean grinding marks, radiused corners. If it's jagged, you got gouge marks, you made them too thin, especially too thin. There's a code, we got to maintain a certain width of these straps, and if they're under, they're rejectable. They're completely out. Or if it's a nick break and you start cutting in too deep, or you use too wide of a grinding disc, they're rejectable. A good welder can fail a test and it not even because of their weld. That also brings me back to when I was a young chap and someone was like, hey, you see that big 36-inch piece of pipe over there, or that big pressure vessel? We're going to pick it up with a crane. Can you throw a strap on it and get ready for the crane? And I'm just like, okay. I've never picked anything up rigging-wise ever before, and I'm standing there with the strap. I just didn't know. No one told me until that guy standing next to me was like, here, you idiot, and handed me a straps and some shackles. You should know some basic rigging as a welder in the construction industry. We'll just keep it simple with a strap and a shackle. You have your vertical hitch, which is just shackle and strap straight up. You have your choker hitch with a shackle. The biggest thing here is you loop it through that you make sure you rotate that shackle the right direction. We can also take the shackle out of the equation. Never tighten a shackle with a wrench. That should never be the case, but make sure it is all the way screwed in. We're going to do the same thing, but without the shackle. Take the loop, run it through, you got your choker hitch. You want to be a little extra, you just go wrap around another time, and then you got your double choker hitch. And then you have the really simple ones, which is your basket and your double basket. I never liked these because you got to have like a square object and multiple baskets to hold it. You can't just basket with one. That's super dangerous. Choker is the way to go. I think you should know the classic slip knot, which is an easy one. You just go ahead and run it through, loop it around, you got a little loop, and then you could put whatever in that loop, tighten it up, and that's what I used a lot to hoist up tools, objects from the ground up to heights. Not only that, but a good clove hitch is a good knot to know when it comes to what I always used it for, which was tying off my welding leads. We'd have to bring the welding leads up really high, and so there was no weight on them while I was welding. I would do a clove hitch on that in there and then plug into the end. You got to know a little bit of knots and a little bit of rigging. Number 31 definitely sets you apart from other welders, and that's knowing how to read blueprints and your weld symbols. And I'll be completely honest, I've only had a handful of jobs that actually required me to look at a blueprint, have weld symbols, and know how to understand all the lines and all the information on a drawing. There's been a few, but the other half the jobs I had, they were just like, hey, go over there and do the welding thing that you do. I will say that you don't necessarily have to know these weld symbols and blueprint drawings, but it will absolutely make you a more valuable employee at the end of the day, especially whenever you're trying to move parts of the industry. You have that in your back pocket. Plus, you always sound a little smarter whenever you like, well, actually, if I ever catch you out and about with a soapstone that's rounded off, or you just using a square end to write or mark on stuff, especially for layout, I'm going to just be upset. I see people use soapstone wrong all the time. If you want to sharpen that sucker, not with the grinder, all that smoke in the air, that's actually kind of dangerous. Could have asbestos in it. So you want to make sure that you use a file, keep that down to a minimum. I like to take the flat side, sharpen it, take the other side, turn it on the edge, sharpen that corner so I have a pointy side and then a flat, sharp edge on the other end. This is great because you're able to write legibly with the pointy side, and then you could take the flat edge with the knife edge on it up against rulers to make all your straight lines and layout marks. Use your soapstone right, because if it's rounded off, you're not going to have a clear mark that you need. And everyone else will say, well, use something else. I like soapstone. It's classic. It's always done me right. Don't forget where you came from either, because when push comes to shove and there's not a whole lot of work in the shop, I hope you know how to push a broom really good, because that's what's going to keep you around. Let us know down in the comments section if we missed anything on what any good welder fabricator should know how to do. Go weld something.